Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. Sorry that I'm late. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. This is the 7th live stream of Thousand Autumns Book 5. And I'm excited to say it's the second to last one of the series. So that is super exciting. Hello, Momar's Rover, and hello, Truffle. Again, sorry that I'm late today. I ended up working out after work and got caught up in some other stuff. Hello, Chichi Kiki. No, I totally get why you would be watching ice skating. I watched some of it on my break at work, and it was really pretty. It's really cool. But this is a chill stream, which means I will be chatting with my lovely book garden and myself, and it's very low key. That is not everyone's flavor, which is perfectly fine. But maybe stick around, you might enjoy it. Hello, Annika. Welcome. How's everyone doing tonight? How was everyone's weekends too? I know I had a great one. It was my birthday, so that was super nice. I had that spontaneous card opening stream on my birthday, and it was a lot of fun too. It was very spontaneous, but I am glad that Chichi Kiki managed to see the alert, and I had a buddy, which made it a lot more fun than just doing it by myself. But oh, you watched a little bit of it too, Truffle? Awesome. Weekend was okay. All right. Good. The sliding event's better. Like the curling event. I watched a little bit of curling at lunch. It's always so interesting to me. Nice. Yeah. Lots of adoptions with the guinea pig rescue. Nice. Bobsled, luge, and skeleton, actually. Oh, everything but. I think curling is fascinating. It's such a weird sport. Like, someone must have just gotten very bored one day and then was like, what do I have and what can I use to play? There's at least one person from my state on the curling teams. Nice. But yeah. I am not sponsored. I don't own anything except for the book that is literally in front of me and my time, and sometimes not even that. Oh, that's cool. There's actually a curling facility near you. I think there's one like a couple towns over from me. But directly near me, there's a pickleball place like right down the street for me, which is interesting. Has pickleball made its way into the Olympics? Actually, now I'm curious. Is pickleball an Olympic sport? Is pickleball an Olympic sport? Let's see. Not currently. Okay, and will not be featured in the 2028 Los Angeles Games. Popularity is skyrocketing. It has not yet met International Olympic Committee requirements for international multi-continental participation. It is, however, set to debut at the 2026 Special Olympic USA Games. Huh. All right, so it's making its way up there. Change the tennis courts to pickleball courts at lots of our parks. Oh, I'm going to have to check out my local park that has tennis courts. See if they're now pickleball courts. Be disappointed because I remember going there and just playing. My friend and I would just go like Tuesday nights and just randomly hit balls back and forth with each other. Let me see. What am I forgetting? Oh, yeah. Not sponsored. I don't own anything. That's Seven Seas and Meng Shi, which I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. Now, in regards to our chat poll, Book Garden won by a landslide, so the chat will now be our lovely Book Garden, which is very cool. I did think one of our suggestions about how about calling you guys the basement was interesting. So pickleball is kind of like racquetball. It's what I remember playing it. It's kind of like picture the rackets for ping pong and the wiffle balls from like kids softball or like kids baseball, those wiffle balls, and then they're hitting it back and forth kind of with tennis rules. It's interesting, but it's also been a long time since I played pickleball, so I might be getting some things wrong. Yeah, that's also where I played it, Truffle, and it's been a while since high school. They advertised it to us in PE as a sport anyone can play and showed us videos of a bunch of senior citizens playing it. Yeah, we played with foam paddles and wiffle ball balls and used nets. It was a very interesting time. Yeah, it was an interesting unit. And I sucked at it, of course. No, of course. Be kind to yourself, Annika. Yeah, it's something. You know, if it makes sports more accessible to a wider range of people and they're going out and getting active, like power to them. Like, go for it. I just think it's hilarious how widespread it's become. Yeah. I enjoy sports. I just tend to break myself in a lot of physical and non-physical activities. So like I have become more discerning about what sports I choose to play because my body is not kind. Yeah. I do enjoy them when I do play them. That's all good. Okay. Trying to think of not great at team sports. Fair enough. Trying to think of the last time I actually played a team sport. I can't remember. I played soccer for like 12 years. So I greatly enjoyed soccer, but every single time I broke a bone, I moved from forward, back to mid, back to defense. And then finally I just became a really, really good goalie and actually got my team to the championship. And then I was out of town for the final game, so we lost. Daily jog is usually spot the birdies. Nice. I greatly respect you for jogging. Running is not my forte. I'll walk, but it will take me a bit to get there. No, but I do what I can. I have a very active bird feeder that the birds are going to be very disappointed. My dad fills it up like twice a day, and they are going on a trip. So the birds are going to go hungry for a bit until they get back, because I probably will not remember to feed them. But they'll make do. They've gotten really fat from all the bird seed, so they'll be fine. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, Annika. Rather walk 10 miles than run one. No, but let's go ahead and get started. I think that's about it. I'd say we just go for it. What time? 10. Exactly 10 minutes. So, last time we had a side story, and that my brother's mother-in-law is the bird feeder person at their place. She was so mad when the deer raided. My dad had a vendetta against the squirrels, continuing to steal from our bird feeder, and when it was hung up from the tree, and he literally hung it from the roof, and we've got a little bit of an ease in front of our big window, and it actually worked really well. There was only one squirrel that really made an attempt climbing up the other smaller window on the side, because we've got a big pane of glass, and was like reaching towards it, like just like, I see it, it's right there. They were unsuccessful, and we didn't really have squirrels after that, so maybe they just content themselves with whatever falls to the ground. But it was very entertaining to witness. But yeah. Okay. I think I'll change the time a little bit, because I went on another tangent. 11:30. Okay. So we're gonna go on to side story 3. Squirrel woke me up yesterday. I was doing parkour and bounced off my screen. It's always fun when random things bounce into the window, and that's how you wake up. Yep. So last time we were reading side story 2, and we had an interesting moment. So the Prince of Jin is trying to kind of cozy up to Shen Qiao because he's trying to get him on his side, and it's not really working. Shen Qiao keeps turning him down, neither cold nor warm, matched the distance that Xuandu Mountain kept from the Prince of Jin. But it was one thing to think this. Yang Guang didn't dare reveal any trace of rudeness or disrespect in his expression. The perfected master is too modest. If we consider seniority within the Jianghu, Yu Xiu is even your esteemed self's junior. It's a given that he should receive your guidance. However, if you are unwilling, we naturally cannot force you. In a few days, it will be the Double Ninth Festival. I also reported to His Majesty that we'll be holding a banquet in the spare villa on Chui Hua Mountain. Would the perfected master do us the honor of attending? This prince warmly welcomes you, naturally. Now that he'd said this, he was afraid that Shen Qiao would think the venue too crowded and be unwilling to attend, so he made sure to add some more. The banquet won't be any unconcerned persons. There will only be famed literati from the schools of Taoism and Buddhism. We're following the example of the scholarly discussions from the Wei and Jin dynasties. It certainly won't be a lowbrow affair. Shen Qiao looked apologetic. It certainly won't be a lowbrow affair. Shen Qiao looked apologetic. It's most unfortunate. This Taoist is about to set out for Xuandu Mountain today. He fears that in a few days he'll be on Xuandu Mountain and hence unable to attend the banquet. He begs the Prince of Jin's forgiveness. Fury swept across Yang Guang's face, but he quickly recovered his smile, then picked up his teacup and drank everything in one go. I was the one asking something impossible. The perfected master need not be so concerned. After Yang Guang and Yu Xiu left, someone spoke from behind the colonnade with a leisurely voice. You really offended him. Shen Qiao didn't turn his head, but simply sipped a few mouthfuls of tea as he said, "Sect leader Yan was cowering within his house like a turtle, so I was forced to play the villain." Yan Wushi laughed. "Who made Taoist Master Shen so compassionate and kind? If I'd come out instead, then Yushiu probably wouldn't even be able to leave the gates of Xuandu Monastery." Shen Qiao sent him a pointed look, but he said nothing. Yan Wushi bent at the waist and brushed his lips over the side of Shen Qiao's face, leaving a trail of heat from his breath in his wake before he finally stopped at Shen Qiao's ear. "This venerable one originally planned on returning to celebrate Qixi with you. I didn't make it in time, but at least I won't miss this winter solstice." Shen Qiao's face was a little red. It was unclear whether he had been warmed by Yan Wushi's breath or if he was blushing from shyness. "Your trip was rather long this time." Yan Wushi gave a low chuckle and continued to tease him. "So Taoist Master Shen missed me?" Blasted by these words, Shen Qiao's face grew even redder. "You know that wasn't what I was asking." "Then what were you asking about?" Yan Wushi seemed to take great enjoyment in teasing him, and he also appeared very interested in Shen Qiao's ear. Oh god, here's the ear part. Alright, he plays with his ear. Shen Qiao had gone completely stiff as if he'd been immobilized by martial technique. He was unable to move at all. He arduously mobilized his willpower. "Enter the heart of the cognate?" "No, I went to go Guyeo." Yan Wushi even rattled off a few sentences in fluent Goguryeo. Yeah, no, I skipped the ear part. I'm not reading that again. Goguryeo? What did you do there? Ginseng is plentiful there, so it's a trade location for Huan Yue's sect. I passed through the eastern cognate on the way there, so I took the chance to look around. Duan Yang is currently doing quite well there. He's even been elevated by the Tulan Kagan, Yang Yu Lu. He's practically become Hulagu II now. Shen Qiao shook his head. As his heart isn't on the martial path, he'll never become a second Hulagu. I find that monk Yushiu from earlier much more interesting. What? Said Yan Wushi. Is having me not enough for you? You want a monk, too? Shen Qiao's face instantly flushed red, his mouth falling open as he stammered. He was angry and wanted to refute Yan Wushi, but he didn't know where to start. Made for a pitiful and lovable sight. Yan Wushi couldn't help but burst out laughing. He picked Shen Qiao right up like a princess and carried him inside. Okay, so that is where we left off last time. So that was our side story from before. All right. Side story 3. It was the night of the winter solstice. The lanterns hadn't been hung. Tiny specks of firelight glistened beneath the eaves. Shining through thin sheets of red paper, together they formed a line of crimson that illuminated the entire courtyard. The snow continued to fall in drifts, neither great nor little. Yet it was enough to turn the whole world white. It blanketed the rooftops, the ground, and trees all the same. Martial arts practitioners did not fear the cold. The door to the house was open, but there was no wind, so no snow fluttered inside. Sitting within the house, they could use earth dragons for warmth and even enjoy the snowy scenery. 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm gonna guess earth dragons might just be like a hearth, or maybe like a small, like hand furnace. This wasn't Xuandu Monastery, but the former junior preceptor's residence in Chang'an, now known as the Duke of Wu's residence. After Yang Jian had succeeded, he'd done as Yuan Yang had and named Yan Wushi the junior preceptor, then made him a state duke. In truth, everyone knew that this was only a title and nothing more. It didn't matter what Yan Wushi was called. Even if he had been declared a general or a marquis, Yan Wushi would remain the same Yan Wushi, and Huan Yue sect the same Huan Yue sect. No one could affect his standing. Compared to Yuan Yang, Yang Jian had a deeper understanding than the emperor alone was unable to call all the shots. There was many rich and powerful families, all with long-established histories and influences, which meant that even rulers were forced to heed their opinions. Seeking to break free from the power held by such families, he proclaimed a new system of imperial examinations, completely different from the 9-rank system that had been in place since Wei and Jin. This allowed numerous scholars from humble families to propel themselves upward by passing the exams. But this means that the authority that had originally belonged to the officials responsible for selecting new ministers no longer existed, instead being reclaimed by the emperor. Scholars from humble backgrounds were naturally delighted, but the noble families were not. Therefore, in order to contend with their immense power, it was impossible for a long time for Yang Jian to toss Huan Yue sect aside. As for Xuandu Mountain, the current cornerstone of Taoism, it was better to win them over instead of throwing them away. As the founding emperor of a dynasty, Yang Jian naturally understood this. His preferential treatment towards Buddhism was a given, but he didn't forget to indulge the Taoist with various favors either, wanting to maintain a balance between the two schools. Meanwhile, he also put great effort into supporting Confucianism, establishing Sui as an equal competitor to Southern Chen and pulling their talents over. The disparity in strength between the North and the South grew clearer with every passing day. Seeing that a battle between the two was inevitable, people's hearts gradually began to waver, and indeed, quite a few of the South scholars traveled north to Chang'an to take the Northern Dynasty's imperial examinations. With how bright the Northern Dynasty's future was, everyone thought the same. That if things went as expected, the Central Plains that had been fragmented since Wei and Jin would once again see unification in the future. However, at this moment, the man sitting within the junior preceptor's residence and facing the snowy courtyard did not look happy at all. The reason was thus. In front of him was a bowl of dumpling soup. More precisely, it was a bowl of dumpling soup made using lamb broth as the base with tang yuan mixed in. Shen Qiao gave a slight frown. Staring at this bizarre melody, Shen Qiao had no idea what expression he should make. I don't know why that is bizarre, but if anyone has an idea, I would love to hear it in the book garden. A man stepped out from behind the screen, saw his expression, and smiled. The winter solstice is equally important as New Year's. The North eats dumplings, the South tang yuan, and in the Riverlands they drink lamb soup. Okay, I should have just kept reading. Now all three have been assembled, allowing you to experience a gathering of all the lands. Why are you unhappy? I thought it was 2. Hang on. Let me see. Is tang yuan sweet? Tang yuan sweet. Tangyuan is almost always sweet, traditional Chinese dessert consisting of glutinous rice balls filled with sweet ingredients like black sesame, peanut, or red bean paste. They're typically served hot in a sweet syrup, often infused with ginger or rice wine, symbolizing family unity and togetherness during festivals. Yeah, that's like the little bowl soup thingy, the circle bowls. Yeah, it's this stuff. Like I've seen this stuff before. Like that. But Tangyuan. Yeah. Oh, that would be weird. So sweet rice balls in lamb soup and with dumplings. Ugh. Like, like I mean, I've had like sweet potato soup, so I've had like sweet-ish soups before, but not. No. Like there's trying to combine different cultures in one, but you got to do it with a balance. Like, okay. Now all three have been assembled, allowing you to experience a gathering of all the lands. Why are you unhappy? Shen Qiao shook his head. I don't enjoy eating them this way. Tangyuan should be a sweet food, so why is it mixed with lamb soup? Did someone come up with this to please the emperor? Shades of Shilian's cooking here. Yep. Yan Wushi lightly clapped. You guessed correctly. At the winter solstice's banquet this year, the Prince of Jin came up with this method to please the emperor. He even named it the Soup of Unity, meaning that the entire world will be united as one. Yang Jian was delighted and handsomely rewarded him. Prince was on the scene as well, and his expression was quite spectacular. God, he's such a messy bitch, and I love him. He's so excited about the tea and discord. The banquet for the winter solstice excited about the tea and discord. The banquet for the winter solstice had been held yesterday when Shen Qiao was away from the capital. He hadn't needed to attend, but Yan Wushi had gone. To him, it was the same as going to watch a good show. I think Yan Wushi has actually cooked in the book before, and it wasn't terrible, which is surprising, but I mean, the man is ridiculously competent, so part of me is surprised, the other part of me is like, of fucking course he knows how to cook. He'd learn it just to be able to piss somebody off. Shen Qiao lightly exhaled, letting out a puff of white. When someone grows up, their thoughts grow complex as well. The Prince of Jin is much more eloquent than the Crown Prince, so his parents pamper him more. This is reasonable, but I've seen darkness lurking within his expression, and there's a certain malice in his eyes. I fear he won't be satisfied remaining the Prince of Jin for long. Feel like he was working with limited ingredients, but he'd be terrible let loose in a kitchen? Potentially. I can see it both ways. Yan Wushi gave a slight sneer. Weren't his thoughts already complicated as a child? Hearing this, Shen Qiao couldn't help but cast his mind back to that time when Yang Guang had viciously stabbed Chang'an. Does the emperor intend to appoint a new crown prince? He asked. Others would have been horrified at this topic, but to them it was something trivial and ordinary, nothing to take seriously. Not now, perhaps, but it's hard to say in the future, Yan Wushi replied. If everything proceeds as expected, there'll be a southern campaign to Chen next year. If Yang Jian and Lady Dugu truly preferentially prefer, Yang Guang, they will definitely make him a marshal to let him have some military exploits. He sat down next to Shen Qiao and wrapped his arms around his waist, then lowered his head to take a bite as he scooped up a dumpling. The taste isn't bad at all. Here, shall this husband feed you? Yan Wushi made to hold out the wooden spoon to Shen Qiao, and sure enough, received a glare for his troubles. This husband. Sect leader Yan, please have some dignity. Though several years had passed, this man's skin remained as thin as paper, unable to take the slightest bit of teasing. But the more he saw this, the more Yan Wushi loved teasing him. Dignity? But you don't seem to be so worried about my dignity tonight. But you didn't seem to be so worried about my dignity last night. Ooh. Before Shen Qiao could say anything to spoil his fun, Yan Wushi grabbed his chin and passed him a mouthful of soup. For a moment, everything fell silent. There was only the faint rustling of falling snow outside, punctuated with the soft sounds of lips and tongues meeting within the house. A pigtail puller will always be a pigtail puller. Yes, he will. I have a little bit of ick for the sharing of the soup. I know they've done it a lot, but it also just said that he, chewed a dumpling first, and I didn't hear it say, he took another bite, so he's, baby birding it right now. And I'm like, if it was just broth, I'd be okay with it. I don't think it's just broth. So I'm like, huh? It was some time before Shen Qiao finally shoved away the man who was glued to him. We're talking about serious matters, he panted. Don't just start fooling around. This is called having some fun. It was obvious that Shen Qiao did not approve of this kind of fun, and contorting his expression further was the lingering taste of lamb soup in his mouth. Ugh. This kind of lamb soup mixed with tang yuan and dumplings. He really had to excuse himself. He thought about the winter solstice banquet, where quite a few people must have struggled to appreciate this soup of unity. But with the emperor's enthusiasm hanging over them, who would have the nerve to say so? Shen Qiao sighed. As an emperor, Yang Jian is indeed wise, so I feel like my choice was correct. It's only when his children are involved that he becomes somewhat foolish. Now that it's already decided which son will be king and which will be subordinate, he shouldn't flaunt his favoritism for his second son so much in public. What kind of position does that put his eldest in? Yan Wushi tried to grab him, but then he saw Shen Qiao nimbly tuck his hand back into his sleeve, and some regret came over his expression. This isn't hard to understand, he said. Many brilliant people have a blind spot when it comes to a certain subject. Yang Jian and Lady Dugu are the same. If this continues, sooner or later a tale of discord between brothers will play out. There are no siblings within the imperial family. That has been true all throughout history. It isn't uncommon. The Crown Prince's personality is a bit weak, but should he ascend the throne, I trust that he'd be able to follow in his father's footsteps, said Shen Qiao. However, it's hard to say the same for Yang Guang. When I try reading his features... He shook his head and didn't continue. Instead, he said, sometimes it's not good to be too clever. Those who are clever believe that they're the only person in the world who matters. This makes them even more isolated and lonely, which will eventually result in a great deal of anguish and trouble. In the end, they become a burden to both themselves and others. Changing the crown prince would bode poorly for both the Yang family and the world itself. Yan Wushi burst out laughing. Qiao, are you talking about me? Shen Qiao shot him a look. Are you like this, sect leader Yan? Not at all, said Yan Wushi. After all, I'm much cleverer than Yang Guang. Shen Qiao couldn't keep a straight face. He laughed, and his eyes curved into crescents, a sight to melt the heart. Even if a tempest raged around them, as long as someone saw this smile, no challenge would feel too great, and the world around them seemed too warm. This was what Yan Wushi thought. That Yushu isn't as simple a character as he looks, Shen Qiao said. Yan Wushi, with his beauty in his arms, had already moved on to considering tonight's plans. Which location should they choose in order to deepen their passion? Of course he isn't, he said carelessly. I've already had Bian Yanmei investigate him. Currently, the news I received says he's the same as Duan Wen Yang, a child with both Gokturk and Han blood. He has Gokturk ancestry? Yan Wushi nodded. This matter is most intriguing. Someone with Gokturk ancestry enters a Buddhist sect, becoming a disciple of Buddhism, yet he also accompanies the Prince of Jin, their relationship murky and ambiguous. The relationship between Su dynasty and Khaganate is also an ugly one, yet there's a half-Gokturk monk by the Prince of Jin's side. What do you think he means to do? Isn't this incredibly intriguing? This was quite a shock to Shen Qiao. You're saying that Yushu and the Prince of Jin have that kind of relationship? Yan Wushi countered. Did you seriously fail? I never really thought in that direction. Yan Wushi sputtered a laugh. If you didn't notice, clearly you lack experience. Shen Qiao stared at him. There's nothing for it. This venerable one has no choice but to wear myself out once again. I'll use my body to instruct you properly. Shen Qiao could say nothing. Okay, so if you didn't pick up on the implication, it was very blatant, but it sounds like Yan Wushi is implying that Yushu and the Prince of Jin might have a intimate relationship. At least that's how I'm reading it. I might be reading it wrong, but that's what it sounded like he was implying. Why is this itchy? Okay. Which is intriguing. Okay. 37... 15. Sippy sip. All right. How's the internet, by the way? It was kind of windy today, so I'm checking in. Side story 4. Shen Qiao wasn't sure if Yushu was really in an illicit relationship with the Prince of Jin. Perhaps Yan Wushi had simply disliked him on sight. But these were minor, all inconsequential details. That's how I read it to you, because I remember thinking, wait, there were more gay people in this book? Okay. Give me a sec, I'll just refresh it real quick before I start this next section. Okay. All right. Hopefully this will be better. All right. I'm just going to restart. Story 4. Shen Qiao wasn't sure if Yushu was really in an illicit relationship with the Prince of Jin. Perhaps Yan Wushi had simply disliked him on sight. But these were all minor, inconsequential details. What was truly important was that Yan Wushi's words had revealed a key piece of information, one that linked the Khaganate, the Buddhists, and the Prince of Jin into one. And from this, Shen Qiao discovered an issue he'd never noticed before. The current Crown Prince, Yang Yang, didn't hold Buddhism in high esteem. He preferred to debate and discuss with Confucian scholars on their classic and principles. The Buddhist sects didn't wish for their influence to end with Yang Jian's generation, though. So they took a gamble on the next and sent an outstanding disciple from one of their sects to foster good relations with Prince of Jin. This wasn't strange. If Shen Qiao hadn't disliked the Prince of Jin himself, he might have been pleased to see Shiwu and Yuan Song grow friendly with him as well. The strange part was Yushu's Gokturk ancestry, and it was very possible that the Buddhist discipline themselves knew nothing of this. It really made one's imagination run wild. Shen Qiao sank into contemplation as he murmured, "Could it be a coincidence?" Yushu lost his mother when he was 5, and he entered Tiantai sect at 7, said Yan Wushi. There's only a wall separating Ronghe village from the lands beyond the Great Wall, so the Gokturks plundered them year after year. Yushu's origins were not secret. When he turned 6, a great drought descended upon Ronghe village and killed many people. The survivors were forced to leave, and because of that, Bian Yanmei was able to follow those faint trails and learn about this. What's even more interesting is that by the time the drought arrived, he'd already disappeared from Ronghe village. Shen Qiao knew that the story didn't end there, and he quietly waited for Yan Wushi to continue. After his mother's death, the villagers ostracized him, Yan Wushi went on. He vanished one night. Even after the drought came and left, he never showed up again, so the villagers assumed that he'd either left and starved to death or been carried off by some vicious animal. Such a young child was able to travel thousands of miles from the north to the south and arrive safely at Tiantai sect. That should be all but impossible, unless someone was helping him throughout the journey. And the person who helped him was the Lady Yuan. Which Lady Yuan? Asked Shen Qiao. Princess Da Yi. Shen Qiao was stunned. He's been stunned a lot this book. Princess Da Yi was once an honored princess of northern Zhou. During that time, she'd married into the Khaganate and became the wife of Ishbara Khagan. With her encouragement, the Khaganate and the newly established Su dynasty had warred with one another, and the Khaganate was defeated. After Ishbara Khagan's death last year, in accordance with Gokturk customs, she'd married Tulan Khagan. Even now, she was still a Gokturk Khatun. Lady Yuan sees Yang Jian as the traitor who toppled the Zhou dynasty, so she's eager to get rid of him. However, since she doesn't have enough power, she can only bow her head to Yang Jian for now, while plotting for the future. This Yushu is one of the secret pawns she's prepared. Lady Yuan bore a deep-seated grudge toward Yang Jian, born of grievances over her family and nation. Though her plans of instigating the Khaganate into going to war with the Su dynasty had fallen through, she was unable to drop the matter since she still had connections to Yushu. In fact, she'd even changed her strategy, using more covert methods to destabilize the Su dynasty's foundations. Everybody be scheming. The Su dynasty was currently in excellent condition. Even if they declared war on the Chen dynasty and marched their army southward, their victory would be just around the corner. The time for the Su dynasty to unify the lands was imminent. Now that the Gokturks were suffering from civil strife and thus incapable of fighting back. Internal affairs weren't entirely devoid of weaknesses either. For example, the issue between Yang Jian's two sons. Yang Jian and Lady Dugu's favoritism for their second son, together with Yang Guang's own burning ambitions, meant that a dispute over the position of crown prince was inevitable. If Yushu could counsel Yang Guang, helping him to conquer the throne, he would be sure to obtain Yang Guang's trust. Then he could slowly, bit by bit, impose his influence upon him. Reasonably speaking, the lands should see unification within Jiang's generation, so the next emperor's task would be to secure the fruits of Yang Jiang's victory, consolidating the various powers. But with Yang Guang's temperament, it was unlikely that he'd be satisfied with being a ruler who only maintained his predecessor's achievements. If someone fanned the flames when his time came, it wasn't difficult to imagine how the situation would develop. Shen Qiao's experiences over the past years had affected him. It was rare to see him grasp such torturous affairs with perfect clarity. As he pondered this matter, he couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Every step has been planned out and reinforced, a strategy that will come to fruition as easily as waters flowing through a canal. On the outskirts of the capital was Chuhua Mountain. Two people stood at its treacherous summit, facing the wind as they gazed down at the capital. The location was jagged and craggy, the terrain slanted. Even if the scenery on Chuhua Mountain was beautiful, officials and nobles still preferred to build their villas at the foot of the mountain, or the halfway point at most. As such, there was little human presence here, but the dense forest and faint birdsong prevented it from feeling desolate. The winding landscape of the mountain's foot was exquisite. Ever since Yang Jiang had ascended the throne, Chang'an had grown more prosperous by the day. They saw that the golden age was imminent, yet Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi could already anticipate what would happen 10 years or even decades into the future. Yan Wushi stood with his hands behind his back. Lady Yuan's plot is no small one, he said coolly. Unfortunately for her, even if she topples the Su dynasty, what does it matter? The Yuan family no longer has any talents who can take back their country. What can a single woman who is married into the distant cognate do? It's laughable and pointless, that's all. Shen Qiao sighed. But this bit of peace for the common folk didn't come easily. I really don't wish to see it destroyed. Yang Jian is an outstanding ruler. Unfortunately, the Su dynasty's good fortunes won't last long. They won't continue beyond the second generation. Why are you so certain? Asked Shen Qiao curiously. Yan Wushi asked in return. Qiao didn't object. Doesn't that mean you agree with my words? Xuandu Mountain has hundreds of years of legacy as a Taoist sect, and they've dabbled in fortune-telling through facial features. I have observed Yang Yang's face. He is excellent in wealth and honor, but has none of the signs of a ruler. Meanwhile, Yang Guang overflows with auspicious qi, and he's also blessed with the 9-5 orientation, the sign of an emperor. Yet, he shook his head and didn't continue. Yan Wushi smiled. In truth, there's no need for you to perform divinations or read their features. You see, if anyone wished to topple the Su dynasty, they'd find a way to enthrone Yang Guang. His personality is diametrically opposed to Yang Yang's. If he became emperor, he'd strive to achieve something grand. It wouldn't matter if it was Yu Xiu or some other random person. When the time came, they'd only need a single foreign war, draining the common folks' resources and creating dissatisfaction in the lower levels. Furthermore, Yang Jiang's adjustments to the bureaucracy and establishing the imperial examinations have already offended the gentry. Once it happens, the aristocrats and commoners will oppose the emperor together. A lucky break won't be able to save this dynasty. It's inevitable it will be replaced. Shaken by the scene Yan Wushi had described, Shen Qiao was quiet for a long time. Those words were enough to shake all of heaven and would have astounded anyone. That didn't mean they were impossible. The dynasty hadn't granted Yan Wushi any official position, but few people in the world could match his view in viciousness. Viciousness. Now, the more profound Shen Qiao's cultivation grew, the more proficient his divination became. The tiny glimpses of heaven's design that he'd seen confirmed everything Yan Wushi had said. First destiny, second luck, and third feng shui, he said. These are the factors that determines one's life. A person's destiny might be predetermined and inevitable, but luck comes from the Hu Tian after birth. It may still be possible to turn things around. If Yang Guang is willing to behave himself and rid himself of malice towards us, Huan Yue's sect can continue collaborating with him, even if he ascends to the throne, said Yan Wushi. However, if he nurses a grudge him, even if he ascends to the throne, said Yan Wushi. However, if he nurses a grudge towards us for our unwillingness to befriend him and seeks an opportunity for revenge, then all those lurking threats around him will become crises that will backfire on him in the future. Understanding dawned on Shen Qiao. So that's why you didn't touch Yushiu. Yan Wushi smiled. That's right. When you look at it this way, what does Yushiu's background have to do with us? Shen Qiao released a slow breath, then returned his gaze to the distant scenery. Currently, Huan Yue's sect took orders from Yang Jian, but theirs was a relationship of cooperation, not subordination. Yang Jian knew this very well, so his collaboration with Yan Wushi was a pleasant affair. Yan Wushi, in turn, was happy to remove troubles and threats for him. But if Yang Jian's successor, Wushi's character, would keep old affections in mind. If possible, Shen Qiao would naturally wish for the world to remain peaceful, for the chaos of war and the agony of separation to never again appear, for the common people to enjoy their lives in peace. But he also knew very well that this was impossible. Just as every person possessed a lifespan, dynasties too had their own destinies. Perhaps it was the Su dynasty's destiny to last 100 years, or maybe only 50. Such things weren't determined at the founding of the dynasty, but would change as each ruler made their decisions, accumulating blessings and fortunes both that would intertwine and offset each other. Thus, they'd influence the rise and fall of that dynasty. The lingering blessings Yang Jian had left for his descendants. How many years could they buy for the Su dynasty? Shen Qiao couldn't help but wonder. He thought that he'd finally supported a wise ruler onto the throne, but perhaps it had only been the beginning. He felt that it was a pity, but that he also quickly grew relieved. The tides rose and fell, the clouds gathered and scattered, the flowers bloomed and withered. It had always been this way, from the genesis of the world. As long as one could face this fact with a peaceful mind, they would remain undefeated. What are you thinking? Asked Yan Wushi. Shen Qiao smiled. I was considering heading south in the next couple of days. I heard that there are many fantastical mountain landscapes, the kind you'd imagine at the end of the sky and seas. Such impressive scenery is worth a look, and one can even watch the vast and magnificent ocean tides. I trust that it'll be beautiful beyond words. And Wushi raised an eyebrow. Taoist Master Shen is going alone. Would sect leader Yan be willing to accompany this humble Taoist? This venerable one shall consider it. Shen Qiao couldn't help but find this amusing, and the corners of his lips stretched upward. In the distance, the heavens stretched high and far, brimming with vitality, while the mountains and rivers sprawled forth, endless and exquisite. This was the dawn of a new dynasty, as well as the dawn of a new era. Perhaps there was chaos within, but there was also an even greater radiance. Ooh, we got a little bit of a flashback here. 25 years ago, Shuandu Mountain. I'm older than you, so you must call me Shixian. Yui was holding on to Shen Qiao's robe, preventing him from leaving. While Shen Qiao struggled to continue walking forward, Yui trailed behind him like a little duckling, and the two of them entered the main hall, one in front of the other. I won't. Shuandu Mountain's rankings are based on time of entry. I'm the Shixian. The little Shen Qiao was gentle. He refused to budge a single bit when it came to this. There was a ripping noise. Yui had used too much force and torn Shen Qiao's robe. The two of them were instantly dumbfounded. There it is again. When he saw Shen Qiao's reddening eyes, Yui scrambled at a loss. I didn't do it on purpose. Shen Qiao sniffled. Shizu gave me this robe. A warm palm rested on his head and gave it a pat. Then its owner crouched down and pulled both Shen Qiao and Yui into his embrace. What's wrong? As if he'd seen his father, Shen Qiao buried his head into the newcomer's shoulder and sobbed. Yui ripped my robes! Knowing that he was in the wrong, Yui, Chi Fingwei, consoled them both. It's fine. It's only a hole. That's all. This master will patch it for you later. Today, the disciple of your Lin Shibo, Shou Shixiang, is about to head down the mountain for training. You can send him off on this master's behalf. Dry your eyes quickly. Shen Qiao, good child. Hearing this, he quickly raised his sleeves to wipe at his eyes. Then he raised his head and asked, Will it be dangerous for Shao Shixiang to head down the mountain? Not at all, said Chi Fingwei. Your Shou Shixian's martial arts are enough for him to protect himself. Though our Shuandu Mountain doesn't involve ourselves in outside affairs, if a disciple takes the initiative and asks to descend the mountain for training, they will naturally be allowed to do so. We don't insist that they must always stay and practice on the mountain. And I agree, all babies. Here is on the mountain. And I agree, all babies. Hearing these words, Shen Qiao and Yui couldn't help but show expressions of envy. In their eyes, being unable to descend the mountain for training meant that they'd attained a certain level in their martial arts. Okay, so I think they made a mistake here because it says in their eyes being unable to descend. Oh, descend the mountain meant they'd attained a level in the. I think they mean. I don't think they that correctly. Maybe I'm wrong. Shizun, in the future, will we be able to do the same as Shou Shixian and head down the mountain for training? Chi Fingwei smiled. Of course you can. Once you turn 15, you can head down the mountain yourselves. After leaving the mountain, what do you want to do? Yui snuck a glance at Shen Qiao, then averted his eyes at top speed. I want to go down and earn money so I can purchase a tengren for Achia. I probably use the martial art Shizun taught me to help good people and beat off the bad ones. But can I return after only a month? How could one determine who was good or bad? Again, the words of a child. But Chi Fingwei didn't douse his enthusiasm and instead gently asked, Why only a month? Shen Qiao was a bit embarrassed. Because I don't want to leave Shizun and my siblings for so long. I wish that everyone can be happy together for a very big. The wind blew past, rustling the trees and leaves and flowers, preserving these words of his within the ages. Though the grass and trees island, the end. But seriously, 10 out of 10 Shizen. Best Shizen. They look adorable. Look at him with his little baby buns. Look at his little hair buns. They're so cute. They're so precious. I gotta notice that it like was struggling to reconnect, so I'm gonna refresh it. Hang on. We'll continue the next part. Chiefing. Okay. There we go. I refreshed it, so it should. I got a notice that it was lagging, so I refreshed. Okay. I think that's better. One sec. All right, so the next part is called Wish. Pen. Okay, there it is. Okay. So, 101.30. Okay. Wish. Over 200 miles of golden sand stretching as far as the eye could see. The Gobi Desert seemed as though one could walk for their entire life and never reach its end. The noisy wind battered his face. It was painful. Yin Chuan had already gone a full day and night without any water. Sand blew into his mouth and nose with every breath, and his throat ached as if it was being scraped with a knife. But still, he had to keep going. If he didn't and his pursuers caught up to him, all that awaited him would be death. He didn't know how long he'd been walking. Stretching far ahead and into the distance was the same expanse of yellow. Yin Xuan was almost in despair. The sword on his back felt abnormally heavy, impacting his pace and breathing, and fling it far away. But he couldn't do such a thing. The sword existed with the man. But when the sword perished, the man did as well. Yin Xuan's family was owed a blood debt, and they were waiting for him to collect it. His sweat trickled down his forehead, dripping into his eyes and blurring his vision. As the wind howled around him, Yin Xuan thought he could still hear his own panting. Though his body had already reached its limits, almost unable to keep going, one thought remained in his heart, preventing him from giving up, stopping him from collapsing. From the distance came the sound of hoofbeats. Yin Xuan didn't know if he was really hearing pursuers or if he was already exhausted to the point of hallucination. But they once again drove his survival instincts to take over. Somehow his legs filled with strength and even quickened his steps. This gentleman was once so handsome, a jade tree in the wind, yet after a few days of rushing about, he's become so wretched. Just seeing him makes my heart ache. The gentle, lovely voice elicited no surprised joy or curiosity within Yin Xuan. Instead, it was like he'd seen a ghost, his face filled with terrified shock. The reason was simple. Just now, there'd clearly been no one nearby, yet the voice had suddenly exploded within his ears. Unless something had gone wrong with his hearing, this meant the other party's martial arts vastly outstripped his own. Yin Xuan summoned all the strength within his body and sped up even more, yet the voice clung to him like his shadow, following him without pause. Why does this gentleman ignore me? Is my beauty not enough for you to stop? This sounds... Is this a man or a woman? Woman. Got it.
Why does this gentleman ignore me? Is my beauty not enough for you to stop?
Yin Xuan's hand trembled faintly. His legs no longer seemed to be his own. They were aching and sore to the point of numbness. His danshin was completely empty, his true qi utterly exhausted. Finally, he couldn't hold out any longer, and he collapsed right to the ground. The voice sputtered a laugh, then said sweetly,
Oh my! This gentleman so pitiful. This one will lend you some help.
Yeah, I think it's probably by wrong. A hand, so soft it seemed almost boneless, gripped Yin Xuan's shoulder before effortlessly lifting him right off the ground and placing him beneath a tree. Yin Xuan gasped a breath, then scrubbed away the sweat on his brow. His vision gradually cleared, and he saw a young woman dressed in red with a pretty face standing in front of him. She was staring at him, smiling as she played with her hair. The days he had spent fleeing had transformed Yin Xuan from a wealthy young master who knew nothing of dangers and hardships to a man full of vigilance at all times, both as he slept and woke. Even with the girl's harmless appearance, he dared not underestimate her. "Why is this maiden following me?" he asked, incredibly cautious. The girl smiled.
Naturally, it's because you're handsome.
Yin Xuan took a gulp of water from the water skin he'd been carrying on his person. This soothed his throat somewhat. "Many thanks for this maiden's kind words. I'll be leaving now. May we meet again in the future." For a girl in the spring of her youth to appear in the Gobi Desert and to even follow a man she'd never seen, Yin Xuan pretended that he hadn't noticed anything strange. Once he felt that his strength had returned somewhat, he quickly stood and made to leave. But the next moment, a single line from that girl stopped him dead in his tracks.
"I heard that the lord of the Yin family had a veritable host of concubines, indulging himself nightly. So why does this young master act like a nestling who's never seen a woman before?"
So she had known his identity, and she'd come with something in mind. Yin Xuan's gaze instantly turned wary, and his hands silently tightened around his sword. Seeing this, the girl laughed.
"You can't even defeat me. What's the point of putting on such an act?"
Yin Xuan only saw a blur. In an instant, his sword had already flown from his hand, landing nearby, and his acupoints had also been struck, leaving him unable to move. "Who exactly are you?" Yin Xuan was both furious and panicked.
"I am called Liu Shu Fei," the girl introduced herself with a face wreathed in smiles. "I know that someone's pursuing you. If you're willing to enter He Huan's sect, I can guarantee your safety."
The Yin family had no martial arts background. Yin Xuan himself was just a mediocre practitioner. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to subdue him so easily. But he still knew about He Huan's sect. Under the leadership of the sect leader, Bai Rong, their power and influence was expanding with each passing day, especially now that they'd received the favor of the current emperor. Rumor had it that they, together with Buddhism, had divided the emperor and empress's support between them. "I'm not a member of the Jianghu," said Yin Xuan. "The Yin can only accept the maiden's kind interest. This Yin can..." Wow, I really misread that sentence. Liu Shufei didn't grow angry at his rejection and only continued to smile.
"An ordinary man bears no sin, but holding a precious stone will cast him as a sinner. Most of your family's wealth has been hidden, and only you, the next head of the Yin family, could know where it is. The people of Tuyuhun are eager to restore their country, so they'll never let you go. Yet you lack the ability to protect those things. Sooner or later, you will fall into their hands. Instead of letting this happen, why not join Huan's sect and receive our protection? We won't gobble up the Yin family's entire fortune, at least. We'll split it half and half with you. What does Yinlang Jun think? 4 years ago, Yang Guang had ascended the throne and subsequently launched a war against Tuyuhun. He annihilated Tuyuhun in one fell swoop, then turned upon the Yin clan, the wealthiest family in Tuyuhun. The Yin family suffered a massacre, and Yin Xuan alone had managed to escape. After the Yin family's destruction, the court ferreted out quite a fortune, but it was a far cry from the legends that had claimed the Yin family possessed enough wealth to rival a country's. Thus, a rumor had quietly spread, claiming that the key to the Yin family's treasury was hidden on Yin Xuan, and only he knew where the treasury lay. As a result, Yin Xuan, who'd yet to recover his senses after his clan's massacre, found himself the target of pursuit from all directions. The Su dynasty's imperial court, the remnants of Tuyuhun's power, both were looking for him, and now even Huan's sect had come knocking. Yin Xuan forced a smile. I won't lie to the maiden. I've never had such a key, and the Yin family has no treasury. Though my ancestors amassed a large fortune, my father squandered everything long ago. The imperial court has already looted the rest. I have nothing at all. Liu Shufei, naturally, didn't believe him. The Yin family had hosted a great number of guests. Everyone knew their members drank from cups made of glaze, that even their chopsticks were made of gold and inlaid with jade. The crafty hare keeps 3 burrows. Those who believed that the Yin family would fail to leave themselves a way out. Liu Shufei said sweetly, From what I know, the people of Tuyuhun aren't only after your fortune, they're after your life. Huan's sect only wants half of your family's wealth and will even guarantee your safety. Is Yinlang Jun incapable of weighing his options and making the correct choice? My only fear is that once I fall into your hands, the decision won't be mine to make. Liu Shufei was somewhat astonished. She hadn't expected that this tender and pampered youth would be capable of thinking this deeply. She gave a small smile. You've considered this quite thoroughly, but isn't there one thing you failed to realize? The decision isn't yours, even now. She stretched her arm forth, and her red sleeve fluttered with an airy fragrance, bringing to mind the charming scene of Jiangnan in late spring, gentle and exquisite. Already immobilized, Yin Xuan could only helplessly watch as that hand drew closer. There was nothing he could do. Yet, in the end, the hand of the girl in red never touched Yin Xuan. The next instant, a blur swept before him, and she was fighting a man. Yin Xuan didn't rejoice that he'd been saved. Instead, his complexion grew worse. He recognized this man. This man was the reason he'd spent the past few days fleeing for his life. Chang Lugui, the disciple of Tuyuhun's state preceptor, the Kosa sage. The two parties rose, flapped, and danced as their internal energy swept forth, pouring out in vigorous waves. Only the immobile Yin Xuan found himself suffering, as from time to time the waves would assault him. Poor dude. His whole family's been massacred. People are chasing him, and he's just basically a fish in a bucket at this point. Needless to say, he was rather dejected. Yin Chuan thought that the two of them were like dogs biting and tearing at each other over a chunk of fatty meat, and his unlucky self was that meat, left to the mercy of others. No matter who won here, it would do him no good. Liu Shufei was clearly vastly superior to Cheng Lu Gui in martial arts. Cheng Lu Gui was quickly reduced to wretchedly defending himself, and Liu Shufei smiled all the while. This young gentleman doesn't practice his martial arts properly. You should return to your Shifu's bosom to drink a few more years' worth of milk. Why did you show up here just to embarrass yourself? Damn, deep burn. She was so delicately pretty, yet her words were so harsh and venomous they'd make a person wish they could crawl into a hole out of shame. Cheng Lu Gui was furious, his face flushed crimson. In halting Han's speech, he said, "You should mind your own business. This isn't the Central Plains, and it's certainly not your Hihuan sect's territory. If you stick your hand in too far, careful that it doesn't get lopped off." Liu Shufei smiled brightly. I would love to be lopped, but I fear you lack the ability. Would this venerable one have the strength, then? A voice carrying a hint of age suddenly rang out. Though it sounded unremarkable, Yin Chuan suddenly fell to the ground. Buzzing filled his ears, and a muffled pain woke in his chest. He almost coughed up a mouthful of blood. Liu Shufei, who'd been holding victory in her grasp, suddenly went pale. Being faster to detect danger compared to Yin Chuan, her red robes drifted backward, her movements as graceful as a butterfly's, and she alighted upon a tree branch. A person was standing upon that flimsy tree branch, yet it only swayed a little. Liu Shufei wiped away her look of shock, her bright smile returning. So it was the state preceptor of Tuyuhun. This little girl apologizes for her disrespect. The Kosa sage wore a kasaya, yet it wasn't in the style of the Central Plains Buddhists. Instead, he was dressed like a monk from beyond that territory. His face was average, his brows arched towards his temples, and his eyes were both narrow and dull. He appeared only around 40 years of age. Okay, I'm curious what that looks like. Kasaya. Saya? Kasaya. Kasaya. Oh, okay. So it's this. Okay. Come on, let me center it. Okay, so I guess this is a Kasaya, the Buddhist. Sorry, I was trying to zoom in. That was being finicky. Kasaya. But apparently it's not in the usual style, so I could look up Central Plains one, but it's fine. It's fine. Okay. If not for Liu Shufei exposing his identity, it does look rather like a sari. Yin Chuan would never have guessed this man to be one of the world's foremost martial arts masters, as famous as the likes of Huanyue sect leader Yan Wushi, Xuandu Mountain sect leader Shen Qiao. In front of this man, Liu Shufei had to be exceedingly careful. Even if her face was smiling, it couldn't conceal the wariness within. Is your Seam sect leader Song doing well? Asked the Kosa sage. Liu Shufei started, but she instantly recovered her smile. I fear that it's been too long since the sage had visited the Central Plains, and he's grown a bit muddled. Currently for us, sect leader Bai is in charge. Same draping style? Okay. Is that so? Said the Kosa sage coolly. When I was in the Central Plains in the past, Bairong was merely a little girl, still wet behind the ears. Now she's even posing as the sect leader, and her disciples, too, have no aptitude to speak of. Truly, each generation is inferior to the last. What an ass! Liu Shufei's expression stiffened slightly. Though she was enraged, she dared not voice it. The sage speaks too seriously. With our leader running things, Huan sect has become larger and stronger than ever, far more than when sect leader Sang was around. If the Kosa sage is willing to travel to the Central Plains and visit us as a guest, Huan sect will extend to him the warmest of welcomes. The Kosa sage laughed loudly, yet the sound was uniquely cold and apathetic. Ha 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 ha! A sect whose leader earned her spot through her woman's charms, enchanting an emperor of the Central Plains, dares to call itself strong. Don't think that this venerable one is unaware of all your two-faced dealing. What a misogynist! Yeah. As he spoke, his entire person rose into the air, seemingly without pushing off anything, completely spontaneous. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Liu Shufei, his robe and sleeves sweeping towards her as if blown by the wind. Liu Shufei knew with Liu Shufei paled with shock. She knew without a doubt that if his palm strike connected, she would instantly suffer broken bones and a mouthful of blood. There was no time to think more, let alone concern herself with the nearby Yin Xuan. She flung herself backward straight away, letting herself fall. Right before she brushed the ground, her palms landed first and patted it slightly. With that, her entire body flipped and turned. In an instant, she'd retreated dozens of steps. Even so, it was clear that Liu Shufei didn't dare to pause for a moment. She turned and ran right after landing, never sparing a single glance back. In the twinkling of an eye, she'd vanished without a trace. The sage. Oh, okay. The sage is a noble and virtuous man. A sweet voice drifted over to them from afar. Shufei has the fortune of meeting him today and was overjoyed. I will not forget to return to tell my master and elders and come again when invited. I'll leave that kid for the sage to deal with. What do I feel like? I was right. I was about to miss a page. Confused, Cheng Lufgui asked, Shizun, why didn't we just capture that demoness? She and Bing Xian are Bai Rong's favorite disciples. Capturing them doesn't benefit us and would only start a feud with Huan sect. That isn't our goal. That was enough to stop Chen Lugui from speaking. Yin Chuan watched as Liu Shufei left, leaving only master and disciple, the Kosa sage, and Cheng Lu Gui. His heart couldn't help but despair. He'd thought that they'd fight. When two tigers fought, one would inevitably fall, giving him the chance to escape. Instead, Liu Shufei had lost and retreated with such speed, dashing his hopes. Now that he'd fallen into the Kosa sage's hands, he feared what awaited him would be worse than death. While his thoughts were spiraling, Cheng Lugui had begun walking in his direction. He grabbed Yin Chuan's shoulder and then viciously flung him to the ground. Didn't you still want to run? Run! Let's see where you can run to. Yin Chuan gritted his teeth and endured the pain. Benefactor Yin, Tuhun was destroyed by the Su dynasty's Yang clan. They also exterminated your family. We should be working together. If you're willing to hand over your family's belongings once the revival is complete, Tuyuhun will dispatch troops to attack the Su dynasty and your blood debt will be repaid. This way you can kill two birds with one stone, so why must you be so stubborn? Because that's not what he wants, and everyone's trying to kill him. Like, he right now. Like, that's why he's not cool with this. This wasn't the first or second time Yin Xuan had heard such words. The other party simply refused to believe that the Yin family's vast riches had been squandered completely. Yin Xuan didn't feel like arguing, so he simply closed his eyes and remained silent. Chang Lugui sneered. Shizun, this brat is far too stubborn. I'll make him open his mouth. He extended two fingers and pinched Yin Xuan's shoulder, then slid them downward. As he did, cracking noises rang out along the arm, and Yin Xuan could withstand it no longer. He began to scream in pain, rending muscle from bone. Why go so far? In the middle of this extreme agony and torture, Yin Xuan seemed to hear that voice sigh. However, he was completely incapable of sparing the attention to recognize it. He'd even thought he'd heard wrong. A stone flew towards Cheng Lugui's wrist. The Kosa sage gave a cold sneer, raising his sleeve to slap it to the ground. However, Cheng Lugui could no longer continue with his torture of Yin Xuan. It seemed that someone had secretly struck him from behind. He only felt the pain along his back. His acupoint had also been struck, leaving him unable to move. At the same moment, the Kosa sage realized that something was wrong with his disciple. He immediately freed Cheng Lugui's acupoint, but paid no further attention to Yin Xuan. Instead, he was both shocked and furious. He was furious at how his opponent had fainted and then struck from somewhere else, and at how their sneak attack had succeeded right beneath his nose. He was shocked at how audacious this person was, at their supreme confidence. Clearly, they were terrifyingly strong. The other party had no intentions of lurking out of sight. After that strike, they emerged from behind a tall boulder not too far away. Fluttering Taoist robes, a face that was serene and handsome. He looked like an immortal. The Kosa sage was in no hurry to strike. Once one lived to his age, they'd naturally develop the ability to assess all kinds of things. Though the man looked young, he possessed incredible martial prowess. One couldn't determine his age based on his appearance. A list of people within the Jianghu with reputations on par with his own quickly surfaced within his mind. It wasn't difficult for him to identify the man in front of him. To think that the great and lofty Xuandu Mountain sect leader would perform a surprise attack on his junior like a coward. He truly fails to live up to his reputation. Shen Qiao smiled. Yet the Kosa sage tolerates his disciple hurting a junior. That doesn't seem too just and upright of him either, now does it? His tone was gentle, without even a touch of provocation or anger. Enduring immense agony, Yin Xuan opened his eyes to stare blankly at Shen Qiao. He didn't know whether this man's arrival meant his salvation or another fresh round of suffering. Inwardly, the Kosa sage was frowning. Their current location wasn't a lively one, and yet Hehuan's sect had showed up, and now it was Xuandu Mountain. It was clear that the Yin family situation was known to all now. To prevent further delays from causing future problems, he had to quickly lead Yin Chuan away. There's history between our Tuyuhun and Yin Chuan, and he's taken things that should belong to Tuyuhun, so my venerable self must naturally take him away. I asked Taoist Master Shen to mind his own business. Hearing this, Yin Chuan was stunned. Unable to concern himself with anything else, he shouted, Save me, Taoist Master Shen! I didn't take anything that belonged to Tuyuhun! Shen Qiao cast a glance at Yin Chuan and then said to Kosa Sage, He isn't the sage's disciple, so could the sage give me some face and allow me to take him away? The Kosa sage sneered. Taoist Master Shen, your words are truly bizarre. On what grounds must my venerable self hand someone of mine to you? Once these words fell, he ignored whatever reply Shen Qiao might have had and simply struck at him. Qi surged forth like the wind wailing through forests and mountains, sweeping through the cloud-cloaked peaks. It rose and fell as it swept out, and Yin Chuan only felt an enormous pressure bearing down on his head, which immediately began to throb as nausea overcame him. Shen Qiao promptly acted. He raised his sleeve and severed the Kosa sage's qi, reversing it right after. Kneading the true qi into an orb, he flung it back at the original sender. The Kosa sage's robes billowed upward as one. He was no longer in his original spot. But Shen Qiao didn't raise his head. Instead, he swept forward. The instant he moved, a figure appeared in the spot where he had been standing. It was the Kosa sage. Yin Chuan watched with round eyes, shock and terror entwined. Only now did he grasp the true profundity of the Kosa sage's martial prowess. The only reason he'd been able to run so far before was because Cheng Lu Gui's Shifu had never personally shown up. The moment he swept forward, Shen Qiao grabbed his sword and Shanghi Tongbei emerged from its sheath. He leapt into the air and performed a reverse downward slash. Wherever the sword glare reached, sparkling lights closely followed, its majesty resonating with both heaven and earth. The Kosa sage's expression shifted slightly. He dared not receive this blow, but he instead chose to withdraw and fall back. But the moment he drew back, he realized with a shock his own lack of will to fight, that he even wished to retreat in the first place. Even if his abilities would have been on par with Shen Qiao's, this momentary slip would ensure his defeat. Sure enough, the sword glare followed him in hot pursuit. Shen Qiao's figure didn't pause for even a second. His sword qi surged forth, slicing a section of the Kosa sage's sleeve right off. Shen Qiao used this chance to pull Yin Chuan behind himself. Only then did he stop and stand tall with his sword. The Kosa sage's complexion shifted erratically. The Xuandu Mountain sect leader is truly indeed worthy of his reputation. The sage is too kind, Shen Qiao said generously. If you'd gone all out, I fear that I too wouldn't have gotten off easily. Hearing these words, the Kosa sage's heart eased a little, but as he'd just watched the duck he'd cooked fall into Shen Qiao's hands, he was naturally unwilling to let this matter rest. I heard that after Yang Guang ascended to the throne, he renounced the relationship Yang Jian previously had with Taoism and went to support Buddhism instead. Logically speaking, Zhu Hun's desire to revive our nation shouldn't conflict with Taoist Master Shen's interests at all. On the contrary, we can work together instead. If Taoist Master Shen is willing to hand over Yin Chuan, my venerable self can cede half of the Yin family's fortunes to him. Shen Qiao shook his head. The sage has a couple things wrong. The Taoist discipline's collaboration with Yang Jian had never been a relationship of the supporter and supported. Yang Guang's closeness with the Buddhist discipline is his own concern. For all things in the world, as long as they can move with the flow, they'll naturally thrive. Taoism is this way, and dynasties are as well. I passed through this area, returning from the western regions back to the central plains, and my intervention just now is wholly unrelated to anyone's wealth. Besides, even if the Yin family possessed immense wealth, that belongs to the Yin family. Since Yin Chuan is unwilling to give it to the sage, why does he demand it by force? The Kosa sage sneered, as expected of the head of Taoism, wholly presumptuous and full of sanctimonious nonsense. So what if my venerable self demands it by force? It's important to be self-aware, you bald old donkey. Shen Qiao hadn't said these words, and it was even more absurd to imagine that they could have come from Yin Chuan. They seemed to have emerged out of thin air. The Kosa sage's expression twisted drastically. When Shen Qiao arrived on the scene, he was preceded by hints of his presence, but there was no trace of this new speaker to be found. The Kosa sage had no idea where this other man was hiding, or even how long he might have been eavesdropping. He hadn't noticed at all. "Who is it?" Cheng Lu-Gui yelled as he scanned all around him. "Enough with the tricks!" Then he saw a man leap down from the nearby tree, one that was practically bare and had a few leaves left. Before now, there'd been no one on the tree. Seeing the newcomer, Shen Qiao revealed an expression of helplessness. "Didn't I tell you to wait for me at the inn? Yet again you came to stir up trouble." The man's temples were faintly white, but his face was terribly handsome as he smiled. "There's nothing to do around here. I didn't expect to see something so entertaining." The new man's appearance was so striking, the Kosa sage was instantly able to guess his identity. "Yan Wushi." Now his expression had finally changed completely. A single Shen Qiao was already a thorny problem for him, and now the world's foremost martial arts master was here as well. He immediately lost all chance of victory. It was almost as if the name possessed a magical power. All who heard it would pale with horror. That's the reaction to Yan Wushi's name. Instant horror. Oh, goodness. I am not sure if this is going to be the fifth duckling. We will have to see. I would not be surprised if this is the fifth duckling. Oy. Love Yan Wushi just having to be part of the drama. Of course. He is the drama. He has to be part of all the drama. I knew he'd show up. Of course he does. Where Shen Qiao is, there's the Yan Wushi. It was almost as if the name possessed a magic power. All who heard it would pale with horror. Cheng Lu-Gui held his sword across his chest, his guard incredibly high. Even so, this action was of little use. Yan Wushi raised an eyebrow as he regarded the Kosa sage. "I heard that in last year's top 10 rankings you placed 5th, advancing by several ranks. My venerable self's heart has been restless ever since. Why don't we have a spar?" The Kosa sage's mouth twitched. "My venerable self still has some important matters to attend to. I'll keep this incident with Yin Chuan in mind for now and seek martial guidance from the two of you another day." With that, he grabbed his disciple and left. His Qigong had long reached the stage of transcendence. Within a few steps, he was already dozens of yards away from Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi. Yan Wushi had no desire to give chase. Instead, he said to Shen Qiao, "I scared him off." Shen Qiao thought this somewhat comical, but he also couldn't help but say, "The Kosa sage has been in secluded meditation for many years, so his martial prowess is naturally extraordinary. When I exchanged blows with him just now, I discovered that his strength was not inferior, but rather comparable to mine. Alas, he's too anxious to revive his country, so he stumbled on his own inner demons." Yan Wushi gave a little humph. "No need to concern ourselves with him. Let's go eat." He tugged at Shen Qiao and made to leave. Yin Chuan suddenly realized that he could move. Seeing Yan Wushi's actions, he tossed aside the agony in his arm was in, and threw himself over, wanting to cling to Shen Qiao. But with a flick of Yan Wushi's sleeve, he was sent tumbling back again. This one is Yin Chuan. He asked the esteemed Taoist Master Shen to accept him as a disciple." There you go. You were right, Truffle. 5th. "I'm stronger than he is," said Yan Wushi curiously. "So why are you asking him and not me?" Yin Chuan dared not say anything like, "I heard that you were mercurial and erratic," so he could only answer, "My late father held the esteemed Taoist Master Shen in great esteem, and there were those who received his kindness among the Yin family's guests as well. So this junior admires the esteemed Taoist Master Shen's demeanor greatly, and hopes that he can serve at his side. Even cleaning and odd jobs would be a great honor." Yan Wushi bluntly sneered at him. "Isn't this just seeking protection from the capable? By clinging to Ah Qiao, you'll no longer be hunted down." Shen Qiao always gets the duckling. He does. Those words flayed Yin Chuan's intentions wide open. His face grew a little red, but fortunately he'd tanned quite a bit while he'd been fleeing for his life these days, so it wasn't too obvious. "Do you wish to learn martial arts to take revenge?" asked Shen Qiao. Yin Chuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. "This junior will be honest. My personality is slothful, and the couple of masters who taught me martial arts in the past said that I lack talent. Most of the time, I was only interested in calligraphy and painting. If I weren't so useless, I would talent. Most of the time, I was only interested in calligraphy and painting. If I weren't so useless, I wouldn't have been unable to save my family and ended up as the only survivor. Furthermore, it's true that the reason the Yin family was eradicated was that the tallest trees attract wind, but we ourselves held some culpability as well. This was the result of a cycle of karma." Shen Qiao gave a slight smile. "A straightforward person indeed. You're not untalented, but you're unsuited for Xuandu Mountain as well as Huan Yue sect." Yin Chuan only thought that the other party was politely declining him. Though he was disappointed, having the fortune of encountering a martial arts grandmaster in the first place, and even being saved by him, was already a blessing. It would have been truly inappropriate to grow resentful, so he respectfully said, "This junior understands." Shen Qiao laughed. "I didn't finish. Though we won't take you as our disciple, there's one person who is very suited to be your Shifu." A light at the end of the tunnel. Yin Chuan's spirit soared. "Lin Chuan Academy, Zan Ziqian," said Shen Qiao. "Though he's only above average in martial prowess, he's a renowned master painter of these times. However, I can only take you to him. Whether he's willing to accept you will depend on himself." Yin Chuan was overjoyed. "Everyone knows of Master Zan's name. If I can become his esteemed self-disciple, this junior could die 100 deaths without regrets." Yan Wushi, however, was unhappy. "You're going to drag this load back with us to the Central Plains?" Shen Qiao smiled. "It's no trouble at all. If I can help someone, I will. The most that will happen is that I return with you to Huan Yue sect after taking him to see Zan Ziqian. How about it?" Yet Yan Wushi deliberately questioned him. Oh, didn't Bai Rong invite you to attend a spring outing banquet? You're not going? Shen Qiao shook his head. Currently, Huan's sect is too involved in Yang Guang's interests, so I'm unwilling to see her. We'll meet again in the future. Yan Wushi sneered. The mountains and rivers are easier to change than one's character. Huan's sect has always been this way. Don't relapse into your annoying habit of getting all tender and soft. Shen Qiao was at the end of his rope. You... The two of them walked as they conversed. Though their pace didn't seem fast, they flowed as smoothly as the clouds and rivers. In a moment, they were already far away. Yin Chuan gasped and panted. He was about to fall behind. But then he saw that Shen Qiao had already stopped and was waiting for him with a smile. Seeing that he'd be able to see the person he admired his entire life, Yin Chuan felt his body fill with inexhaustible energy, and he quickly ran to catch up. There would always be hope ahead. Okay. I like that. We have one more chapter that we're going to do tonight, but I really need to replace that filter on my air filter. I can feel my dust allergy kicking in. So he gets ducklings adjacent this chapter. Not quite his own duckling. I was about to call him a dumpling. But he gets a duckling adjacent. Oh. My phone is about to die. Here we go. Hang on. Okay. Then I'm going to turn back on my... There we go. I wonder if the painting guy ever gets Shen Qiao to actually sit for a painting. Oh, hello. Hi, Esper lady. I'm trying to think of like, we kind of just have been having like these feel-good little stories. We had a discussion about the potential dynasty and what's to come, and how Yang Guang is probably going to take over, and he did, and how that's probably going to lead to the end of the Su dynasty, because he's too ambitious. But and then kind of this chapter where it's the little side story there. But yeah. But yeah. Hope you're okay. But now we will move on to our last chapter of the night at 148. Yeah. Oh, you finished the coat for your Chubuchi cosplay? That's super cool. If you feel comfortable, post a picture of that on the community page. I'd love to see it later. Only if you're comfortable with it, though. Okay, Ren Ying. The winter winds were bitterly cold, their chill piercing straight to the bone. A roaring whistle sounded and an arrow grazed right by his ear. Ren Ying's chest and lungs burned in pain. Each breath he drew felt like knives gouging into his flesh, but he had no choice except to run. If he didn't, he'd be dead. Ever since childhood, he'd toiled away in the lowest of jobs. He'd had little else, but his legs were fairly good at running. But his pursuers drew closer and closer, yelling as they hefted their torches. They were even full of good food and drink, well satiated, while Ren Ying hadn't eaten for a full day and night. He was running entirely on his last dregs of willpower as he cut through the forest, then past a hill. If he continued running like this, he'd ultimately suffer capture and a sound beating. In the end, it had only been because he'd been starved to desperation and stolen a cloth bundle from a household. It was heavy and filled to the brim with flatbread. He could even smell the aroma. Ren Ying made his decision. Oh, spelling mistake! It says Ren Ying, not Ren Ying. Made his decision. Even if they captured him, he'd hide the bundle or at least toss it far away. He'd never let these people have it. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, he saw a glimmer of light before him. It was a night without stars or moon. That tiny, feeble light flickered, and beneath the cover of the mountain's forest, it seemed dimmer and more obscure than ever. But to Ren Ying, that tiny speck of light was akin to the stars or moon, shining brilliantly. He sprinted towards it without a second thought. Once he made out the scene before him and realized that the light was coming from a broken-down temple, he was suddenly filled with regret. This shabby temple was utterly isolated. It must have been something like 800 years since someone had last worshipped or made offerings there. Why would there be a light? Could it be his pursuers' companions? If there was no back exit, wouldn't he soon find himself completely trapped? Ren Ying was but a boy in his adolescence, after all. He wavered, thinking that he'd made the wrong judgment, but it was too late to turn back. He could only barge inside. A pile of burning firewood entered his vision. This was the source of the light he'd seen. However, behind the pile sat a man, currently warming himself by the fire. The man looked like a Taoist priest. His head was lowered, and he was half hidden in the shadows. The pattern of the 8 trigrams upon his robes was already vague and indistinct. Though the wind blew fiercely outside, the fire had been raised in a corner, shielded by the door as it opened, and it hadn't been extinguished. Ren Ying quickly swept him a glance. He saw that the man's clothes were ragged, and he looked fragile and weak, not at all involved with the people relentlessly pursuing him. Thus, Ren Ying paid him no further heed and began searching for a back exit. This broken-down temple was letting in drafts from all sides, but a glance was enough to survey the entire thing. Even the Buddha statue was modeled and dilapidated, missing half of its body. It was impossible to tell which Buddha it was supposed to be. Ren Ying ran several laps around the statue like a headless chicken, his heart despairing and panicked. The footsteps behind him grew closer and closer, and Ren Ying whipped his head back. A large swath of firelight had swiftly arrived, and 7 or 8 men were blocking the door. There was no escape. He should have never entered this temple. The early spring nights were cold, but Ren Ying's clothing was drenched in sweat. He clutched the bundle in his arms and involuntarily took 2 steps back. Brat, where are you going to run to next? You think you're tough. Keep running. Voices rose all at once, their gazes like knives, practically chopping him into various pieces. The man in front stepped out and extended his hand. Give us the parcel. Ren Ying gritted his teeth, reluctant and unwilling, but he hurled it towards the man. The other person was holding a torch. Using only his free hand, he caught the angrily flung bundle. Rather than shoving it at his subordinates, he carried it himself. Have you opened this parcel? He asked Ren Ying. It wasn't an accent from the Central Plains, but one couldn't call his Mandarin imprecise, just somewhat strange. When would Ren Ying have had the time? He'd run right after stealing the bundle, terrified of being captured. The aroma of food would waft out from time to time, but despite how starved he was, he'd forcibly endured it. But before the contemptuous stares of these men, he subconsciously refused to admit defeat. He straightened himself and retorted, I opened it. So what? As he was speaking, Ren Ying glanced at the nearby window out of the corner of his eye. He thought that if the man came up to gang up on him, he'd jump right out the window and flee. The sound of trickling water came from outside. He was a strong swimmer. Perhaps he still had a way out. But before he could realize these thoughts, the man was already grabbing at him. Whether you opened it or not, you'll be leaving your life behind today. The man's movements were terrifyingly swift. Thoroughly shocked, Ren Ying couldn't help but lift his chin and stumble back. When he'd been working for his boss, Ren Ying had learned a couple of moves. He considered himself nimble. Otherwise, he would have never held on for so long while so starved. But these men were supremely skilled, far beyond what Ren Ying had imagined. No matter how quick his reflexes were, he couldn't compare to that man's grab. A chilling aura and pressure engulfed him from the front, and his throat was grasped tightly. At that moment, murderous intent surged, and Ren Ying grew dazed from the suffocation, his hands and feet losing the strength to struggle. As he watched the other party's mouth stretch maliciously, he suddenly realized something. These people were clearly exceptionally skilled. The entire way, they only hunted instead of capturing him. They'd let him exhaust himself before drawing in the nets, much like a cat would toy with a mouse between its paws. However, all he'd stolen was a parcel filled with food. If he hadn't been so hungry, if a little brother and sister hadn't been waiting at home for him, Ren Ying would have never taken the risk of provoking these men. They had enough to eat and drink. They didn't look like people who'd black for one missing parcel of food. So why must they drive him to his death? In such tumultuous times, were the poor truly doomed to be unable to survive? Jumbled thoughts surged within his mind, and the hand around his throat tightened more and more. Out of the corner of his eye, he glimpsed the others, who turned to interrogate the man behind the fire. They thought that he was together with Ren Ying. Ren Ying opened his mouth. He wanted to tell the man to hurry up and leave, but he could no longer make any noise. His vision gradually darkened, and even his limbs had gone stiff and numb. Since he never opened it, why must you be so ruthless? Dimly, Ren Ying thought he'd heard a voice, both near and far, but he was unable to tell where it was coming from. Perhaps he was only hearing things before his death, he numbly thought. He knew that his death was imminent, that there lay a vast gap between their abilities. He had already given up all struggle. But then the pressure on his body vanished, and there was a scream, one that hadn't come from his mouth. Ah! Ren Ying opened his eyes in a muddle and saw a man fly backward and land heavily upon the floor. The Taoist priest by the fire rose and dusted himself off. His clothes were disheveled in a wretched state, yet his movements were as smooth as drifting clouds and flowing waters, or a cool breeze kissing the moon. There wasn't a mote of dust on his face. Even those men had never imagined that someone so formidable would have appeared within this broken-down temple. "You might have stolen something, but that is not a crime that warrants death," the stranger said. "In your belief that someone was plotting after your things, you took him as bait. Now you've realized that it was only happenstance, why not let him go?" The Taoist wasn't at all flustered at the intrusion from these uninvited guests. He was as steady as a mountain, showing neither anger nor surprise. All who wandered the Jianghu knew that the more inconspicuous a person seemed, the less one could afford to provoke them. But this group seemed to have subconsciously concluded that he was the instigator behind Ren Ying. They instantly shot back with a sneer. "Let him go? Then you can take his place!" The man in front attacked first, while his men behind him split into two groups surrounding the Taoist. They had wordlessly arranged themselves into a sword formation. Ren Ying didn't understand martial arts, but he could tell that the Taoist was in danger. 7 or 8 men drew their swords, their sword chi interweaving. For a moment, it was difficult to determine who was near or far. Ren Ying only felt a pressure slamming into his face from the front. He tried to back up, but he was stopped by a pillar. All he could do was flatten himself against it. He saw the Taoists surrounded, and he couldn't resist blurting out, "Careful!" He just said this with a bright laugh ring outside the temple. I think they meant when. An insignificant little sect from Yamato, and you're strutting about in the Central Plains. So, Yamato is actually an ancient name for Japan. That's cool. Those words had exposed their identities. Hearing them, the faces of those 7 or 8 men fell. Just as they were thinking that they'd finish off the Taoists before heading out to deal with the newcomer, the Taoist suddenly shook his sleeves and spread them. The men's sword formation instantly collapsed, and the shock waves caused 2 of their swords to shatter and fly from their owners' grasps. A couple of men reeled back several steps, disbelief written all over their faces. At this time, the laughter from outside drew closer, and a man strolled inside, his robes fluttering, his demeanor calm and composed. "It's only been a dozen days since I last saw you. How did our sect leader, Shen, end up this wretched?" The newcomer clicked his tongue twice. Smile on his lips. He scanned his surroundings. He seemed to be looking at everyone, yet he also seemed to consider them beneath his notice. In the end, only the Taoist had been calmly accepted into the boundary he drew around himself. Yeah. The Taoist seemed familiar with him. Hearing those words, the man shook his head but didn't explain any further. Instead, he turned to the group of people. "Still going to fight?" The leader had heard the words sect leader Shen, and an ominous feeling surfaced within him. For a moment, his suspicious, wary gaze wavered between Shen Qiao and the newcomer. Shen Qiao didn't wait for them to figure out what was going on. He followed up with, "If you're not going to fight, it's my turn." You never want to hear that phrase when it's an unassuming person. It's like, "Oh, if you're not going to fight, I will." Before the leader could react, he felt an all-encompassing pressure before him, enough to topple mountains and overturn the seas. He instantly found himself unable to breathe, and before he could return the attack, he was forced to fall back. Unfortunately, he was still a step too slow. His subordinates could only helplessly watch as their leader was seized by Shen Qiao, completely unable to move. "What are you doing? Let go! How brazen!" Some of them had grown angry in their panic, even shouting in Japanese. 2 of the men were about to rush forward, but they'd scarcely taken half a step when Shen Qiao forced them back with a flick of his finger. The man beside him, who was dressed like a distinguished scholar, never intervened even once. Prelude to someone eating dirt. Yeah, pretty much. He simply watched from the sidelines, his face full of smiles. But though he was only watching, those men from Yamato also felt an immense pressure from him. A single Shen Qiao was already too much for them, never mind the thought of adding another. Infiltrating the Central Plains and browbeating the common folk. To think the great and mighty Shinbu sect, the foremost sect of Yamato, could do something so dishonorable. Oh, that's Shen Qiao. Hang on! Restart! infiltrating the Central Plains and browbeating the common folk. To think that the great and mighty Shinbu sect, the foremost sect of Yamato, could do something so dishonorable. When he heard Shen Qiao's words, the leader paled right away. He subconsciously still wanted to struggle, but then a wave of agony pierced through his restrained shoulder, completely unexpected. He couldn't help but yell in pain as he slumped down, but because his shoulder was still in Shen Qiao's grasp, he could only forcibly support himself on his weak, limp legs. Never mind fighting, I'm going to enjoy the scenery, right? This one is Asano Taku, disciple from Shinbu sect. May I ask if this distinguished master is sect leader Shen of Xuandu Mountain, the world's foremost Taoist sect? Everyone says that sect leader Shen is benevolent and generous beyond compare. So why are his actions so ruthless? It's heavens and earth apart from his reputation, so please forgive me for failing to recognize you. His face was contorted in pain, yet he still remembered to probe Shen Qiao using psychological tactics. The man, watching from the side, suddenly burst into laughter. Showing mercy when the other side clearly bears ill intent, he scoffed. You're describing an idiot, not sect leader Shen. Though our Qiao is a little foolish, thanks to my teaching these past few years, he's at least able to weigh and judge things somewhat. His tone was frivolous, as if he was flirting with some uptown lady. But Asano Taku dared not underestimate him at all, because he could feel an invisible and terrifying presence emanating from the man. It was something impossible to describe. One could only feel it from grandmasters who'd achieved the summit of martial arts. Though Yamato had quite a few martial arts practitioners, there were practically none on the level of the two men in front of him. It also looked like the man was well acquainted with sect leader Shen, for the latter sent him a glance, yet remained completely silent. With two great martial artists on the scene, Asano Taku dared not act so unbridled. He could only endure the pain while explaining what was going on. According to Asano Taku, the Shinbu sect had only ended up in the Central Plains by chance. Originally, they'd been tracking down a missing token from their sect. They'd arrived in Goguryeo, where they'd clashed with the premier sect in Goguryeo, Dongjiu sect. Quite a few members of Shinbu sect had been killed or injured, and disagreements emerged within Asano Taku's party. Some of them proposed returning to their sect first to report, then lay down a plan for the future, since they'd suffered such heavy casualties. But others insisted that they should continue investigating until they found the token, so that they had something to bring back to the sect. Asano's group was the latter. They'd followed the faint trail all the way from Goguryeo to the Central Plains and discovered the token's whereabouts nearby. After a difficult and bloody battle, they managed to retrieve it, only to find themselves heavily surrounded, for many sects were also eyeing that token of theirs. Asano and his men had become like birds, startling at the twang of a bow. They took everyone who approached them as thieves. Even if they knew that Ren Ying's skills were mediocre, that he couldn't even qualify as a member of the Jianghu, they still couldn't help but suspect that there was someone behind him, so they wanted to use him to lure out the big fish. Yet they never expected that Ren Ying was really someone without any background or history, merely a starving thief. Instead, it was Asano and his party who charged headlong into a mighty mountain. No, 2 mountains. After haltingly explaining the ins and outs of his tale, Asano forced a smile to his face, acting humble and submissive. Though we possess eyes, we failed to recognize Mount Tai when it was right before us. We ask the 2 masters to forgive us and avoid lowering your esteemed selves to our level. A trivial sect token, as all the sects hunting you down covetously? Shen Qiao said. You've been avoiding the important matters the whole time. Not once have you explained what the token is. Do you think we're that easy to fool? Shen Qiao disliked causing difficulties for others, but if not for his intervention, Boy would have died at their hands. Though Asano had detailed all their troubles, Shen Qiao still had no intentions of letting him off easily. Who knew if they'd attack someone else once he left? Sure enough, Asano revealed a reluctant expression and stammered, "Why not let me guess?" Yan Wushi paced over slowly, his tone filled with the schadenfreude of one watching a grand show that had nothing to do with him. A while ago, I heard that some disciples from Dongjiro sect defected after carrying out a massacre within their sect, causing great chaos within Gogyeru for some time. Later, people from Gogyeru and Yamato showed up again and again within the Central Plains. Even Tuyehun and the newly born Tibet ended up being drawn into this matter. Ultimately, it was all due to the Mitake sword that found its way out of Dongjiu sect. Legend says that the sword was blessed by the divine, and thus the wielder would be protected by divine light, making them indestructible like the Vajra. Furthermore, the sword blade is carved with mountains and rivers, indicating the location of a treasure. Several groups have been vying for it without end, and now even the sects from the Central Plains have caught wind of this and joined in one after another. Inside that parcel of yours is Mitake, right? Asano's expression had flickered several times throughout Yan Wushi's speech. Though he gritted his teeth and refused to utter a sound, that in and of itself was a tacit confirmation. Ren Ying only half understood what was going on. He was completely confused, but he still knew that the parcel he had stumbled upon and stolen was actually a precious object the Jianghu was fighting over. At once, he couldn't prevent his face from turning ashen. If someone hadn't suddenly popped up to save him, he would have died here. Ren Ying subconsciously hid behind Shen Qiao, his hand gripping Shen Qiao's sleeves. Yet he felt a faint prickling sensation upon his back and instinctively turned to look. He only saw the man who had spoken earlier, who was standing behind the firelight, cast his gaze towards him. There was an invisible threat hidden in that gaze. Ren Ying shrank away and quickly withdrew his hand. Asano was worried that Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi were also here to steal Mitake. He could scarcely imagine that the two were wholly uninterested in the object, for they spoke no further. Instead, they continued to stoke the fire, preparing to rest. Yan Wushi even pulled out a small flask of xiaoju from his lapels. He handed it to Shen Qiao, who smoothly received it and took a swig, then returned it to Yan Wushi. Then he procured a couple of pieces of flatbread and dry rations, giving them to Ren Ying to allay his hunger. Ren Ying thanked him repeatedly. He was clearly ravenous, yet he ate the food slowly. Even after a long time had passed, more than half of the palm-sized flatbread remained. "The bread isn't poisonous. You can be at ease," said Shen Qiao gently. Ren Ying shook his head, then awkwardly explained that his younger siblings at home had nothing to eat. He was terrified that the noble person before him would think that he was asking for more, and failed to notice that Shen Qiao's expression had gentled further. "I still have some dry rations here," said Shen Qiao, "though I can't give them all to you. You're alone and won't be able to hold on to so much food. Afterward, bring your siblings over. This place isn't far from Guyang City. You can settle them here for a while, then look for some work opportunities within the city." Ren Ying had considered entering the city before, but his siblings had been too hungry to walk. Left with no other choice, he could only set out alone in search of food, which was how he'd ran into Asano's cohort. Asano was anxious and apprehensive, and he dared not make rash movements. But there were people in his party who didn't know Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi's illustrious reputations and sought a chance to escape. One of them had just risen under the cover of darkness and taken 2 steps when his waist was struck twice. It had been soundless and quick as lightning. The man hadn't even noticed what was going on before he fell sideways, collapsing to the ground and twitching ceaselessly. These years, no one in front of me has ever dared to come and go freely without my permission. Yan Wushi remained completely calm, and his gaze upon Asano's group was filled with ridicule, as if he were a cat toying with a mouse. Asano did possess the capacity for sound judgment, and so he could endure. But the people around him couldn't. They immediately burst out with a yell and raised their weapons, slashing at Yan Wushi. Since Shen Qiao had done most of the attacking before, Asano's subordinates assumed that Yan Wushi would be easier to deal with. They aimed to take him hostage. All my brain said... My brain instantly popped to the meme. You done fucked up, Aaron! Like, whoops. Since Shen Qiao had done most of the attacking before, Asano's subordinates assumed that Yan Wushi would be easier to deal with. They aimed to take him hostage, right? This was truly an example of digging one's own grave. Death-seeking behavior. One man had just raised his weapon over his head when he was sent flying. His sword shot out of his hands and towards the wall behind the Buddha statue, where the blade stabbed halfway in. Asano looked at his motionless subordinates and felt his mind crack completely. The feeble desire for resistance within him had already evaporated. He grew completely docile and obedient, fearing that even the slightest hint of disrespect would lead to him sharing that man's fate. Oh no. Even if they succeeded, he'd be the worst hostage ever. Oh my god, he'd be such a bad hostage. They would release him just to get away from him. I'd be like, it's not worth it. Within Yamato, the Jinmu sect's power was such that they could do as they pleased. Being used to this, Asano had thought quite highly of himself. Even after arriving in Goguryeo and the Central Plains, at times he'd developed the mistaken impression that the foreign martial artists were below his notice, all because he'd never encountered any of the top martial artists. Now he completely understood that a mistaken impression was just that, a mistake. The reason he'd never encountered any rivals was because he'd never met any top experts. Then Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi, the 2 great mountains, had come crashing down before him. Unable to scale them, he was left in sudden despair. He'd thought that today would become the day of his death, but then Yan Wushi airily let them all go. Get on. Don't let me see you ever again. Shen Qiao supplemented his words with his own. If your lot dares to seek revenge on this young friend of mine, Xuandu Mountain will become your enemy. They'd actually probably end up paying Huan Yue sect to take him back. And Huan Yue sect would make them pay dearly. Yes. Literally and metaphorically. Sect leader Shen's threats are so lackluster, Yan Wushi commented in a chilly tone. Just tell them that you'll hunt them down to the edges of the world to punish them. Then they'll be unable to die in one piece. Wouldn't that settle everything? Having witnessed how terrifying these men were, Asano dared not doubt the truth of Yan Wushi's words. He repeatedly kneeled and bowed, then stumbled back, swearing that he'd never dare take any kind of revenge on Ren Ying, thus showcasing completely their tendency to fall apart before the strong. Only afterward, when their group was a long distance away from the temple and they were certain Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi really had let them go, did they finally allow themselves to sink to the ground. Meanwhile, inside the broken-down temple, Ren Ying had managed to survive a disaster. He stared blankly at Shen Qiao as if he were in a trance. In the aftermath, a belated fear surged within him and his eyes reddened. Shen Xiansheng, I'm worried about my siblings. Can I go pick them up first? I wish to thank and kowtow to the two gentlemen for their great kindness together with them. He'd moved his siblings to a broken-down kiln earlier. It let in the cold air from all sides, and the two children's stomachs rumbled with hunger. They lacked even the strength to trust a chicken. Anything could happen to them at any time. I'll go with you, Shen Qiao volunteered, then turned his head to say to Yan Wushi, I must trouble Yan Xiang to wait here for a moment. I'll leave with our young friend and will soon be back. Yan Wushi prodded at the flames before saying icily, By the time you get back, my venerable self might be gone already. He'd put on great airs, yet Shen Qiao laughed in response. Then, sect leader Yan, you'll have to stoop to waiting a moment. Yan Wushi gave a slight snort, but spoke no further. Well, it's more. Ren Ying was anxious and fearful. He didn't know who Yan Wushi was, but the man's presence scared and intimidated him on an instinctual level. He had no idea that, at this moment, Yan Wushi had already restrained himself quite a bit. One could even call his disposition pleasant. With Shen Qiao there, Ren Ying's reunion with his siblings went smoothly. The two children were so starved that they seemed barely human. They could scarcely open their eyes. Ren Ying dared not feed them too much all at once. He could only have them eat a bite at a time, waiting for them to gradually recover their strength. Only then was Shen Qiao able to ask about Ren Ying's brimming resentment and frustrations. When I was young, I heard my parents say that Emperor Wen replaced Shou and vanquished Chen, unifying the lands, said Ren Ying. We thought that us common folk would be able to enjoy good days ahead. It's only been a few years since the emperor and court changed, so how did things end up this way? A great drought, followed by a great flood. Our family lost everything, and my parents passed away. Our house and farmland were flooded too. Chickens all died. It's fine if I starve to death, but what about my siblings? Where's the hope for us commoners? Will we still be able to survive? Even if you were nimble and had learned a little martial arts, within these troubled times, he was little more than a leaf adrift on the wind with nothing he could rely on. There were thousands and thousands of people just like Ren Ying. Shen Qiao sighed. Before, I also believed that Great Stu, with Emperor Wen, would at least be able to enjoy several hundred years of peace. Looking at things now, it seems that Yan Wushi was truly correct. Ren Ying was confused. What are you saying, sir? Shen Qiao burst out laughing. I'm saying that I know a little fortune-telling, but unfortunately, in all my divinations about the future, I failed to account for the human heart. Who would have thought that Emperor Wen and Empress Dugu, who'd been wise rulers their entire lives, would stumble in choosing their heir? Yang Guang indeed surpassed the emperor's other sons when it came to talents and intelligence, but when the entire world was already within one's hands, the key lay not in how nimble those hands were, nor in what miracles they could perform, but in how stable they were. And Yang Guang's hands were indeed more than nimble, but they were lacking in stability. He held great and lofty ambitions, surpassing dozens of emperors who came before him. The sole things he'd missed were the hearts and resources of the people. An eastern expedition, a transportation canal, and separating the military from the aristocracy and offending the powerful families. These three things were enough to topple his throne and enough to cause the already short-lived nation to sway on the verge of collapse. Though Yang Guang still sat on the throne today, Shen Qiao could already see the crisis brewing beneath the facade of prosperity. Ren Ying knew nothing of this. He couldn't stand that high nor see that far. He only knew that his family and home had perished from natural disasters, and yet the court didn't care. Or perhaps the court lacked the ability to care. Ren Ying couldn't see any hope of survival, but for his siblings he could only hold on bitterly. One day, if even his sole concern was gone, people with similar experience to Ren Ying might simply grit their teeth and turn to the life of an outlaw. Perhaps then he'd gain some riches as he licked the blood from his sword, or perhaps he'd lose his life beneath the glint of blades. On this trip, Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi were just returning now from their wandering journey of several years to the western regions. Along the way, they'd witnessed the violent changes that had befallen the Central Plains, which were ready to retread the fate and mistakes of the northern and southern dynasties. The hearts of the people wavered, and the Jianghu court were irrevocably interlinked. Few of the world's sects were at peace. They seemed restless and poised to cause trouble, with each hatching their own plots. This was the way of the world. Those long divided must be united, and those long united must be divided. So this is the first line of the historical novel, Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The only pity lay in the Sui dynasty's rough destiny. The unity had been too brief. Turbulence had arisen again in a flash. One could only sympathize with the innocent common folk who could do nothing but drift along with the tide, lacking any agency. Thinking about this, Shen Qiao was at a loss. There he goes again. He could lead Xuandu Mountain and even bring his sect to great heights, and he was unable to share these benefits with the world. A single person's strength was limited. No matter how skilled a martial artist they were, they could only protect the people around them. It was impossible to protect all the people in the world. Only good timing, good terrain, and the support of the people who could give birth to an era of peace and prosperity. And how long this prosperity could be maintained depended on how clear-minded the ones in charge were. If you have nowhere to go, why not come with me to Xuandu Mountain? Shen Qiao suggested. There's a village at the foot of the mountain, then there are a few bandits there. They were also fortunate enough to suffer natural disasters this year. Your siblings can spend their days working while studying. It's much safer than wandering about outside. This was the method Shen Qiao had come up with to ensure that Ren Ying could settle down safely. Perhaps he was incapable of saving everyone in the world, but as long as he had the ability to help, it was impossible for him to watch from the sidelines. Ren Ying thanked Shen Qiao. Shen Qiao still felt that the youth's heart was heavy with worries and his spirits low, but his own mind was buzzing with thoughts, so he said nothing more. The three people walked silently back all the way until they reached the broken-down temple and saw the faint. Yan Wushi sat cross-legged behind the fire, playing with a long pole he held in his hand, his head lowered as he carved something upon it. Even when he spoke, he didn't look up. Ah, Qiao, if you wish to have these three eat some roast chicken, then guess what I'm doing right now. Ren Ying and his younger siblings all looked at each other, then stared at Shen Qiao. The corner of Shen Qiao's mouth twitched. You wish to carve a fake Mitake sword? Yan Wushi was all smiles. Sect leader Shen knows me well. Here, this roast chicken is yours. From beginning to end, he hadn't made any excessive displays of power, but for some reason, Ren Ying and his siblings still held an instinctive fear and awe towards him. Hearing this, they looked at Shen Qiao. Only after Ren Ying saw him nod did he carefully shift himself over and thank Yan Wushi in a small voice before picking up a piece of roast chicken. Shen Qiao politely declined the food Ren Ying was trying to share with him and had the three of them move to the side where they could warm themselves while eating. Then he sat down next to Yan Wushi. No matter how dexterous sect leader Yan's hands are, a simple bamboo pole can never become the true Mitake. What kind of ruse are you plotting this time? Did you know the origins of the Shinbu sect's name and why the Mitake sword is called Mitake? Yan Wushi asked instead of answering. Oh, hi Dee. Shen Qiao, I can't leave you alone for a minute, can I? You arrived just as we're ending. We only have a couple pages left, but you'll enjoy this when watching it later. We had some cute chapters. Do you know the origins of the Shinbu sect's name and why the Mitake sword is called Mitake? Yan Wushi asked instead of answering. It's said that the first emperor of Yamato was called Emperor Jinmu, and Shinbu sect claims that they're his direct and legitimate descendants. That must be the reason for their namesake. As for Mitake, it's probably related to their belief in Shinto. Qiao is indeed a man of great learning and ability. Now here's another test question. What does Mitake look like? This, I have no clue. Has sect leader Yan seen it before? Qiao, didn't you realize the Mitake sword Asano's cohort had in their possession was also a fake? Of course Shen Qiao had noticed. Asano had allowed Ren Ying to run off with the parcel containing Mitake before giving chase. This was surely in hopes of reeling in a larger fish using a longer line. If the sword had been real, there was no way he'd be able to stand using it as bait. The real Mitake sword was never in Asano's hands at all. Them running about with a fake sword on their back is probably only a cover for the people with the real sword. Yan Wushi took the bamboo pole, polished and glossy, and wrapped it in silk. As he played with it, it really did look like it could be the genuine article. If I released some news saying that I chanced upon the real Mitake sword, what do you think those who hear of this will do? Oh, it's okay. I'm sorry your phone glitched. All sorts of techniques, hatch all sorts of plots to obtain this bamboo pole from you. He'd specifically emphasized the words bamboo pole. Yan Wushi's smile was full of malice. At that time, I'll find another reason to have this object end up in Asano's hands, then let the whole world know the truth. That he won't be able to clear his name even if he leaps into the Yellow River. Shen Qiao was silent for a moment. They offended you today. I trust that they'll end up drowning in regret in the future. I think they're at an old Buddhist temple, but they are eating chicken. It's a very dilapidated temple, so very rundown. You happen to be here tonight. If that wasn't the case, this youth would have lost his life and his siblings their protection, and they too would have died one after another. Knowing this, can you still pity that bunch? I've never been able to out-talk you, Shen Qiao said. Yan Wushi smiled brightly. Then you should listen to me. The cold nights are long, and I've already warmed the wine. Only when he's full of food and drink can our sect leader Shen have the strength to cherish the world's people. Though his tone was mocking, if one listened closely, there was a hint of coaxing to it, like he was speaking to a child. Shen Qiao watched as he fished out a flask of wine and uncorked the stopper. The aroma of wine immediately fanned out, wafting toward his nose. Shen Qiao took the flask, then tipped his head back and took a large gulp. His movements seemed somewhat urgent, and the wine trickled out from the corners of his lips, meandering down his throat an Adam's apple. When he lifted his eyes again, he saw Yan Wushi gazing at him. And though their relationship was already far from ordinary, Shen Qiao still felt a little embarrassed. That bamboo pole. Shen Qiao had already guessed vaguely what Yan Wushi wished to do. It's not quite this scene with wine if you're thinking of a certain wine scene from a different Danmei. It wasn't as simple as Yan Wushi finding Asano and his group disagreeable and wanting to vent his frustrations. This man had always enjoyed spoiling other people's schemes. Even if no wind blew, he'd still find a way to stir up waves. And with the world showing signs of latent chaos, poised to reenact the scenes of confrontation between Northern Shou and Southern Chen, he was bound to involve himself, secretly guiding the situation while fanning the flames, all so that he could profit from the chaos. We all have a trauma response to Danmei plus wine. Yeah, just a bit. Before he could determine what Yan Wushi would actually do, Shen Qiao decided to bide his time, to watch and wait. After all, even if the man known as sect leader Yan sometimes held wicked intentions, it didn't necessarily mean that he'd do wicked things. He had to conclude that when it came to insight into the state of the world at large, his own still lagged behind Yan Wushi's. Either the wine isn't good, or I'm too ugly, Yan Wushi said. Otherwise, how could your mind wander off in my venerable self's presence? Yeah, MXTX does contribute a lot to my wine trauma. A hand reached out unexpectedly, catching Shen Qiao off guard as it grabbed his cheeks. The great and lofty leader of the world's foremost Taoist sect, who'd appeared as steady as Mount Tai, enigmatic and unfathomable, vanished in an instant. All it took was the blink of an eye, and he'd transformed from refined and cultured to lovable and adorable. Seeing this, Ren Ying was so stunned he even forgot about eating the chicken wing in his hand. That is such a cute way to end our live stream tonight. It is adorable. But yeah, so that is where we're going to end it tonight. I enjoyed this. We actually have one last live, and then we will be done with Thousand Autumns and ready to move on to Peerless. Which is crazy to think about. We've been doing Thousand Autumns for so long. It'll be interesting to have Peerless, because I have not actually read Peerless. But yeah. Good night, Truffle. I will see you Thursday. Good night, Esper Lady. Good night, D. Good night, Chi Chi Kiki. Good night, Jason. Trying to see who else is here. I think that's everyone. Good night, Annika. Yeah. Oh, you sent a picture. Nice. Hang on. Sent a picture. I'm looking. You said... Oh, Insta. Okay. Thank you. Let me see. Okay. Oh, you got your AO3. Very nice. Okay. But anyway.
I will say goodnight to everyone. I will check that and I will message you. But yeah, good night, everybody. Anyone who's watching later, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time for our final 1000 Autumns Live. Bye-bye.